The sun was sinking low over the desert horizon when the trouble first began. A cowboy, hardened by the dust and loneliness of the plains, found himself face to face with a young Apache woman whose spirit was as untamed as the land itself. They had crossed paths near a watering hole, each of them weary from the unforgiving heat. Words turned sharp, and in a reckless moment, he tore her shirt in anger, not out of cruelty, but out of a desperate attempt to assert control over a life he himself had no hold on. But actions, no matter how small, echo loud in the silence of the desert. By dawn, word had spread across the Apache camp. 200 warriors rode with fury in their eyes, coming for the cowboy who had dishonored one of their own. To most men, this would have been the end, a story that ended in violence, a man buried in the sand, his name forgotten. Yet fate often writes its lines differently. When they came upon him, the cowboy did not run. Instead, he stood alone outside his shack, waiting, not with a rifle in hand, but with something no warrior expected. The Apache woman was there too, standing at his side, her torn shirt replaced with a shawl he had stitched together overnight from the only fabric he owned, his own blanket. He had worked through the night, his hands blistered, his eyes red from sleeplessness, making something to return dignity to the very woman he had wronged. The Apache warriors circled. Spears gleamed, arrows were drawn. But the woman raised her hand, her voice steady. She told them what had happened, that in his anger, he had broken her pride, but in his shame, he had given her back more than clothing. He had given her respect. The cowboy had sat beside her through the night, listening to her stories, learning of her people, of their suffering, of the children who went hungry because settlers fenced the rivers. For the first time, he had seen her not as Apache, not as enemy, not as stranger, but as human. And there, before the warriors, the cowboy made a choice no one expected. He took his rifle, the only thing that had ever given him a sense of power, and laid it down in the dust. Then he bent to one knee, not in surrender, but in apology. He asked for forgiveness, not just from the woman, but from the people he had judged without ever knowing. The warriors did not strike him down. Instead, they watched as the young woman stepped forward, her voice strong, her words soft yet unshakable. "He is not our enemy tonight," she said. "He is a man who has learned." That moment changed more than one life. The cowboy, once lost in bitterness, found a path he never imagined, working alongside the very people he once feared, helping them tend to cattle, sharing food when winters grew harsh, and learning that survival was not about who held the gun, but who held the courage to care. Years later, when he was an old man, children, Apache and settler alike, would run through the fields together, playing under the same sky. And when they asked why peace had come to their valley, the elders would tell them of the day a cowboy ripped a woman's shirt, and how, instead of ending in blood, it became the beginning of respect. And far away, in another story unfolding in another world, a billionaire woman returned to her mansion one summer evening. She was exhausted, worn down by the endless weight of money and expectation. But as she stepped into her garden, she froze. There, by the fountain, her son laughed freely with the janitor, both of them splashing each other with the garden hose, drenched in water, smiling as though the world held no walls between them. She watched, her eyes filling with tears, realizing something she had forgotten long ago. Happiness is never in the riches you keep, but in the kindness you share. Two different lives. Two different worlds. But the same truth, whether in the desert dust of the Wild West or in the marble halls of modern wealth. Compassion is the only legacy worth leaving. The desert holds its secrets in silence. But one night, under a blood-red sky, a cowboy made a mistake that nearly cost him his life. He had been riding for days, his soul dry as the land beneath his boots. By chance, he came across an Apache woman at a watering hole. She was proud, fierce, and unafraid of him. Their words clashed like steel on steel, and in his frustration, in his foolish anger, he ripped her shirt. He thought it was over in that moment. Just another fight in a life full of them. But word travels fast in the desert. By morning, 200 Apache warriors rode for him. 200 hearts burning with fury for the dishonor done to one of their own. Most men would have run. Most men would have begged the earth to swallow them whole. But this cowboy, he stayed. Not with a rifle in his hand, but with something no one expected. Through the night, he had worked by the dim light of a lantern. He took the only blanket he owned, tore it into pieces, and stitched together a shawl for the woman he had wronged. His hands bled, his eyes burned, but he kept on. And as he worked, he listened. He listened to her speak of her people, of the rivers fenced off, of children who went hungry. For the first time in his life, he saw her not as Apache. Not as enemy. Not as stranger. But as human. When the warriors arrived, the desert trembled with their anger. Spears were raised, arrows drawn. And yet, there stood the cowboy, empty-handed, his rifle cast into the dust. At his side, the woman, her torn shirt now replaced with the shawl he had made. She lifted her hand. And her voice, steady as stone, carried across the circle. She told them what had happened. She told them what he had done in the night. How he had listened. How he had apologized, not with words alone, but with action. The warriors hesitated. The cowboy knelt in the sand, not in surrender, but in humility. He did not beg for his life. He asked for forgiveness. And in that silence, something changed. They saw not just a man who had made a mistake, but a man willing to learn from it. That day, there was no blood spilled. That day, the desert did not swallow another life. Instead, it witnessed something far greater. A choice. A chance. A bridge between two worlds. From that moment on, the cowboy was never the same. He worked alongside the people he once feared. He shared what little he had. And when harsh winters came, they shared with him. A bond was born, one strong enough to outlast hatred, strong enough to be remembered for generations. Years later, children, Apache and settler alike, played together under the wide open sky, free of the fear their parents once carried. And when they asked the elders how peace had found their valley, the story was told. Of the cowboy who ripped a woman's shirt, and how, instead of ending in blood, it became the beginning of respect. And far away, in another world, another time, a billionaire woman stepped into her home one warm summer evening. Her heart was heavy with the weight of wealth, with the loneliness that money cannot cure. But then she heard laughter. She looked to her garden, and there, by the fountain, she saw her son playing in the water with the janitor. Both of them soaked, both of them laughing as if no barriers of class or power had ever existed. In that moment, her heart shifted. She realized what the cowboy had learned long ago. Happiness is not in the riches you guard, but in the kindness you give. Two stories. Two worlds. One truth. Compassion is the only legacy worth leaving.